In the winter of 1913, Carl Jung, the most celebrated psychiatrist in Europe, protege of Sigmund Freud, and father of modern depth psychology, experienced something that would forever change our understanding of human consciousness. While sitting in his study in Zurich, he began to see visions. Not fleeting images or daydreams, but fully formed, three-dimensional hallucinations that seemed more real than the walls around him. He witnessed rivers of blood flooding across Europe, saw mountains crumbling into the sea, and heard voices speaking in languages he didn't consciously understand. His colleagues whispered that he was descending into madness. His reputation hung by a thread. Yet Jung did something extraordinary. Instead of running from these experiences, he dove deeper into them. He began a process he would later call active imagination, deliberately entering these altered states and recording everything he witnessed in what would become his legendary Red Book. What he discovered during those years between 1913 and 1916 wasn't insanity. It was a doorway into a layer of reality that most humans never consciously access, the collective unconscious. Jung's journey revealed something profound. He possessed what modern neuroscience now calls hyperphantasia, the ability to generate mental imagery so vivid that it crosses the threshold between imagination and perception. His reality threshold was fundamentally different from that of ordinary people. He didn't just think about ideas, he saw them, heard them, experienced them as tangible forces. And through this altered perception, he mapped territories of the human psyche that had been invisible to psychology before. But here's what Jung understood that saved him from the fate of others with similar abilities. The difference between madness and genius isn't the vividness of your inner world. It's your ability to contain, comprehend, and integrate those experiences into something meaningful. As Jung himself stated, psychosis is characterized by a failure to contain and comprehend the content of one's experiences, while he managed to interpret, contextualize, and share his visions with transformative impact. Your reality is not universal. If you've ever had a dream so vivid it felt more real than waking life, if you've experienced a coincidence so perfectly timed it seemed impossible, if you've sensed emotions or energies others insisted weren't there, then you already know what Jung discovered. Your perception of reality is not a passive recording of what's out there. It's an active construction shaped by forces far deeper than your conscious awareness. The uncomfortable truth is this: the starting assumption that all of us share the same reality is completely, utterly, and irrevocably wrong. Every human being experiences a fundamentally different version of reality based on their unique psychological configuration. Some perceive the world through a lens of symbols and archetypes, seeing patterns and meanings invisible to others. Some experience emotions with such intensity they become tangible presences. And some, the rare few Jung called healthy hallucinators, live with one foot in the material world and one foot in realms that others dismiss as imagination. The question isn't whether you see reality differently. The question is, do you recognize the signs? And more importantly, are you brave enough to explore what your unique perception reveals about the hidden architecture of consciousness itself? In Jungian psychology, those who perceive reality differently aren't broken. They're accessing layers of the psyche that hold the keys to profound transformation. Let's explore the 7 unmistakable signs that you're one of them. Sign 1. The archetypal resonance effect. You don't just consume stories, you feel them in your bones. When you encounter certain myths, films, or books, something inside you awakens with the force of recognition, as if you're remembering rather than learning. A character's journey mirrors your own with uncanny precision. A symbol appears repeatedly across different contexts, demanding your attention. Ancient myths from cultures you've never studied seem to speak directly to your personal struggles. This is the archetypal resonance effect, the unmistakable sign that you're consciously accessing the collective unconscious. Jung proposed that beneath our personal memories and experiences lies a deeper layer of the psyche, a universal reservoir of inherited psychological patterns shared by all humanity. This isn't metaphorical. Jung believed these patterns, called archetypes, are passed down genetically, like psychological instincts, shaping human behavior across all cultures and time periods. The archetypes include universal figures like the hero, the wise old man, the mother, the shadow, and the trickster. These aren't just literary devices. They're autonomous psychological forces that express themselves through symbolic language, dreams, myths, religious imagery, and the stories that captivate us most deeply. When a story grips you with inexplicable power, it's because an archetype within you is being activated, bringing ancient wisdom from the collective unconscious into your conscious awareness. Consider the hero's journey, present in myths from ancient Mesopotamia to modern superhero films. If this narrative pattern speaks to you with particular intensity, it's not because you enjoy good storytelling. It's because the hero archetype is active in your psyche, calling you toward your own journey of transformation. Jung discovered that those who perceive reality differently have a heightened sensitivity to these archetypal forces. They don't just read about the hero, they feel the hero's call in their own lives, recognizing the same patterns playing out in their personal struggles and victories. How to work with this sign? Begin tracking which archetypes appear most frequently in the stories that move you. Keep a journal of recurring symbols and themes. When you notice an archetypal pattern, ask yourself, where is this energy active in my life right now? The collective unconscious communicates through these universal symbols because they carry meanings too profound for ordinary language. By learning to read this symbolic language, you gain access to wisdom that transcends your individual experience. This is just the beginning. The archetypal resonance effect opens the door, but what lies beyond requires even greater courage to face. Sign 2, the shadow recognition paradox. Here's something that will make you deeply uncomfortable. The people who irritate you most intensely are showing you parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. That arrogant colleague who dominates every conversation, that manipulative friend who always plays the victim, that reckless stranger whose behavior outrages you, they're mirrors reflecting your own disowned qualities back to you. Jung called this the shadow, the repository of all the aspects of ourselves we've deemed unacceptable and banished from conscious awareness. But those who see reality differently experience something Jung termed the shadow recognition paradox. They simultaneously resist and recognize their shadow with unusual intensity. Unlike most people who project their shadows unconsciously and never question their reactions, you feel the uncomfortable tug of truth when you judge others harshly. A voice whispers, "Are you sure you're not like that?" And though every fiber of your ego screams no, part of you knows the answer is more complicated. The shadow contains not just our darker impulses, but also positive qualities we've repressed. Perhaps you were taught that ambition is selfish, so you disowned your drive for success, and now resent others who pursue their goals unapologetically. Perhaps you learned that anger is dangerous, so you suppressed your capacity for righteous rage, and now judge those who set firm boundaries as aggressive. The shadow is morally neutral. It simply contains everything your conscious personality rejected in order to be accepted by others. Those who perceive reality differently experience emotional overreactions as diagnostic tools. When someone triggers extreme anger, disgust, or envy in you far beyond what the situation warrants, that's your shadow demanding attention. Jung discovered that shadow recognition is the first and most crucial stage of psychological development. Without it, no deeper transformation is possible. As he wrote, integration of the shadow gives a man body, so to speak, providing the foundation for all subsequent growth. A real case from Jungian practice. A woman came to therapy consumed with rage toward fake people who presented idealized versions of themselves on social media. Through shadow work, she discovered that her anger stemmed from her own inability to express her authentic self. She had learned as a child that showing vulnerability meant being rejected, so she created a persona of perfect competence while her shadow accumulated all her insecurities. The fake people she despised were living out the very thing she secretly longed to do: present a curated self to avoid judgment. Once she recognized and integrated the shadow aspect, her rage dissolved, replaced by compassion for both herself and others. How to work with this sign? Practice the 90-day shadow audit. For 3 months, whenever someone triggers intense negative emotion in you, write down exactly what you're judging them for. Then, and this requires brutal honesty, ask yourself, in what ways do I exhibit this quality, even if I express it differently? The resistance you feel to this question is proportional to how deeply the shadow is buried. Remember, shadow integration isn't about becoming the things you dislike. It's about accepting that you contain the full spectrum of human potential, light and dark, and choosing consciously how to channel those energies. The shadow work prepares you for what comes next, recognizing that reality itself is sending you messages through seemingly random events. Sign 3, the synchronicity sensitivity. You've experienced it. That moment when you think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and within hours they call you. The day you're wrestling with a specific problem, and a stranger says something that provides the exact answer you need. You dream of a golden scarab beetle, and the next day one appears in your physical environment. Most people dismiss these as mere coincidences, but Jung knew better, and so do you. This is synchronicity, what Jung defined as meaningful coincidences that connect inner psychological states with outer world events through patterns rather than causation. These events don't follow the normal rules of cause and effect. The universe isn't causing these coincidences to happen through linear chains of events. Instead, they emerge from what Jung called an acausal connecting principle, an underlying matrix of meaning that links the inner and outer worlds. Those who see reality differently experience synchronicity with unusual frequency and intensity. They're what we might call synchronicity sensitive, attuned to the symbolic language through which the unconscious communicates with the conscious mind. Jung observed that synchronistic events cluster around archetypal situations: death, illness, relationship crises, major life transitions. During these liminal moments, our usual defensive mechanisms weaken, creating openings for the unconscious to break through and communicate through images, dreams, and impossible coincidences. The famous scarab case illustrates this perfectly. Jung was treating a highly rational woman whose rigid intellectualism was blocking therapeutic progress. She described a dream in which someone gave her a golden scarab beetle, an ancient Egyptian symbol of transformation and rebirth. At that precise moment, Jung heard tapping on his consulting room window. He opened it, and a scarabaeid beetle, a rose chafer, the closest European equivalent to the Egyptian scarab, flew into the room. Jung caught the beetle and handed it to his patient, saying, "Here is your scarab." This synchronistic event shattered her defensive rationalism and catalyzed a breakthrough in her analysis. Jung theorized that synchronicity connects two types of events: multiple outer occurrences, like finding the lost coat of the author whose character you're playing, or an inner psychological state paired with an outer event, like the scarab dream and the beetle's appearance. Both types reveal the same underlying truth: consciousness and matter are not as separate as we've been taught. They're dual expressions of the same unfolding pattern, connected through the collective unconscious. How to work with this sign? Start a synchronicity log. Document every meaningful coincidence, no matter how small, noting both your inner state and the outer event. Look for patterns. Do synchronicities increase during specific emotional states? Do certain symbols or themes repeat? Jung believed synchronicity was the universe's way of confirming you're aligned with your authentic path. When synchronicities multiply, you're moving in the right direction. When they disappear, you've drifted from your true purpose. This isn't superstition, it's recognizing that reality itself is responsive to your psychological state in ways materialist science cannot yet explain. But perceiving reality differently comes with dangers. The next sign reveals the thin line between genius and delusion. Sign 4. The reality threshold flexibility. Remember Jung's visions in 1913? Modern neuroscience has a term for what he experienced, an altered reality threshold. Most people have a relatively fixed boundary between inner mental imagery and outer perception. But those who see reality differently possess what researchers call reality threshold flexibility, the ability to experience vivid mental imagery that approaches or even crosses the line into perceptual experience. This isn't a disorder. It's a feature of consciousness that exists on a spectrum. At one end lie individuals with aphantasia, unable to generate mental images at all. At the other end are those with hyperphantasia, extraordinarily vivid mental imagery that can rival actual perception in detail and emotional intensity. Jung belonged to this latter group, and if you're reading this with recognition, you likely do too. The Perky effect demonstrates this phenomenon experimentally. Subjects asked to imagine a specific object while a faint projection of that object appeared on a screen often couldn't distinguish between their mental imagery and the actual projected image. Their imagination and perception blended seamlessly. For those with reality threshold flexibility, this isn't an experimental quirk, it's daily experience. You might experience this as extraordinarily vivid dreams that feel more real than waking life, or as the ability to visualize scenarios with such clarity that you feel physical sensations, or as moments when your inner world becomes so compelling that the external world temporarily fades. Jung described how individuals with this trait can create a mental reality equivalent where imaginal experiences carry the same weight as physical ones. Here's where the danger lies. Jung observed that the difference between a visionary and someone experiencing psychosis isn't the vividness of their inner world, it's their ability to contain, contextualize, and integrate those experiences. The person experiencing psychosis becomes lost in their inner reality, unable to distinguish it from consensus reality or find meaning in the experiences. The visionary, by contrast, maintains what Jung called a foot in both worlds. Full access to rich inner experiences while retaining the capacity to function in external reality and extract meaning from the journey. Jung's life demonstrates this distinction perfectly. Despite experiencing what others might call hallucinations, he interpreted the content of his visions, put them into perspective, found meaning in them, and shared them with transformative impact on psychology, philosophy, and spirituality. He didn't deny his visions or let them consume him. He engaged with them as autonomous psychological forces worthy of respect and dialogue. How to work with this sign? If you possess reality threshold flexibility, the key is what Jung called non-identification. You must retain awareness of your vivid inner experiences without becoming them or being controlled by them. This requires considerable moral effort and continuous reality testing. Practice the dual awareness technique. Whenever you enter vivid imaginative states, maintain a small part of your consciousness as an observer, noting this is an inner experience without dismissing its potential significance. Understanding acts like a lifesaver, integrating the unconscious while preventing submersion. This isn't about suppressing your unique perceptual abilities. It's about wielding them consciously as tools for psychological exploration, rather than being overwhelmed by them. Those who master this threshold gain access to a technique Jung considered essential, the art of conscious dialogue with the unconscious. Sign 5. The active imagination capacity. Most people experience their thoughts as an internal monologue, a single voice narrating their experience. But if you see reality differently, you've likely discovered something strange. Your psyche contains multiple voices, perspectives, and autonomous entities that seem to have their own agendas. Dreams present fully formed characters who say things that surprise you. During meditation or deep reflection, figures appear on your inner stage and enact dramas that feel purposeful and meaningful. You can close your eyes and enter inner landscapes as vivid and detailed as physical places. This is the active imagination capacity, the ability to consciously engage with the autonomous contents of the unconscious. Jung developed this technique between 1913 and 1916 during his own descent into the unconscious. Rather than merely observing his visions passively, he learned to interact with them. He would enter meditative states and allow images, figures, or scenarios to emerge spontaneously. Then, and this was crucial, he would engage these figures in dialogue, asking them questions, challenging them, and allowing them to respond with their own autonomous voices. The key principle Jung discovered: you must not consciously direct what happens. In active imagination, you're not creating a fantasy narrative according to your desires. You're watching a drama unfold on your inner stage and participating genuinely in the unfolding events. If a figure appears, you don't decide what it says or does. You observe it, respond authentically to its actions, and report further changes. This requires restraining the conscious waking mind from exerting influence while simultaneously engaging actively as a participant. Jung insisted that active imagination produces material fundamentally different from conscious fantasy. The unconscious presents symbols, archetypal figures, and scenarios designed to address your current psychological situation. These inner dramas often illustrate the tension between opposites within you, preparing the ground for psychological synthesis. At times, the process produces numinous images of wholeness, mandalas, circular forms, or sacred geometry, indicating you're connecting with what Jung called the self, the archetype of wholeness at the center of the psyche. Jung would urge his patients to really have it out with their inner figures, not just sit in the theater of their psyche, but take part in the play. Why? Because these figures represent active energies within your inner city, and transforming your relationship with them transforms your psychological reality. A powerful example: a man struggling with crippling perfectionism practiced active imagination and encountered a harsh, critical figure on his inner stage. Instead of dismissing it or running away, he engaged this figure in dialogue. "Why do you judge me so harshly?" he asked. The figure responded, in his imagination, but with words he hadn't consciously chosen. "I'm trying to protect you from the shame you felt as a child when you failed." Through continued dialogue over weeks, he began to understand this critical voice not as his enemy, but as a misguided protector using outdated strategies. Eventually, he negotiated with this figure, thanking it for its intention but setting new boundaries for how it could protect him. His perfectionism softened dramatically. How to work with this sign? Begin with the 7-day active imagination protocol. Each day, sit in a quiet space and close your eyes. Allow an image, figure, or scene to emerge spontaneously from your unconscious. Don't force it. Wait patiently for something to appear. When it does, observe it carefully. Where are you? What does this figure look like? What is it doing? Then, crucially, engage with it. Ask it questions. Listen for responses. Allow the scene to evolve organically. Record everything afterward in writing or drawing. Jung found active imagination particularly useful during dry spells of dream recall, as it provides another route to access unconscious material. But active imagination reveals something unsettling. The psyche speaks in a language most people have forgotten how to read. Sign 6, the symbolic perception mode. You walk past a dead tree and feel an immediate sense of foreboding about a relationship. A stranger wears a red dress, and suddenly you're flooded with associations about passion, danger, and vitality. Numbers appear repeatedly. You wake at 3:33 a.m. multiple nights in a row, receive important news on the 3rd day of the 3rd month, and encounter 3-part choices at crucial moments. Most people see a tree, a dress, and random numbers. You see a symbolic language through which reality is communicating. This is symbolic perception mode. the ability to experience reality as inherently meaningful, where objects, events, and patterns carry psychological and spiritual significance beyond their literal properties. Jung discovered that the unconscious communicates primarily through symbols because symbolic language can express truths too complex and paradoxical for rational thought. When you perceive reality symbolically, you're not projecting meaning onto a meaningless world. You're recognizing layers of significance that were always there, invisible to those locked in purely literal perception. The collective unconscious expresses itself through symbols precisely because they transcend cultural and linguistic boundaries. The symbol of the circle, for instance, appears across all human cultures as a representation of wholeness, eternity, and the self. It emerges spontaneously in children's drawings, in mandalas created by Tibetan monks and medieval Christians, in modern art by people who have never studied Jung, and in the dreams of individuals going through profound transformation. This isn't cultural transmission, it's an archetype expressing itself through symbolic form. Those with heightened symbolic perception don't just understand symbols, they experience them with emotional and physical impact. Seeing a mandala doesn't just register as interesting geometric art. It evokes a felt sense of centering, wholeness, and numinosity. Encountering snake imagery doesn't just trigger thoughts about reptiles, it activates deep associations with transformation, danger, healing, and primal energy. The symbol bypasses rational analysis and speaks directly to the deeper layers of the psyche. This capacity, however, can become overwhelming. When everything becomes potentially symbolic, how do you distinguish genuine meaning from projection or coincidence? Jung's answer: emotional intensity and relevance to your current psychological need. Situation. A truly significant symbol grips you. It won't let go. It appears repeatedly across different contexts, and when you reflect on it, it illuminates something about your present challenges or developmental stage. How to work with this sign? Create a personal symbol dictionary. When a symbol captures your attention with particular intensity, spend time with it. Research its historical and mythological meanings across cultures. But more importantly, explore your personal associations. What does this symbol mean to you, regardless of what books say? Write it down, draw it. Notice when and where it appears in your life. Over time, you'll develop a fluency in the symbolic language your unconscious uses to communicate with your conscious mind. This isn't superstition, it's learning to read the native tongue of the psyche itself. But there's one final sign, perhaps the most challenging to accept: the recognition that consensus reality isn't the only reality, and you've always known it. Sign 7. The multi-reality awareness. Here's the truth that will either liberate or terrify you. Consensus reality, the shared world most people agree exists, is just one possible interpretation of the raw data of existence. And somewhere deep inside, you've always known this. You've felt the edges of other ways of experiencing reality, other modes of consciousness where different laws apply. In dreams, you've inhabited worlds with their own internal consistency, where flying is normal and time moves fluidly. In moments of deep creativity or meditation, you've touched states where subject and object dissolve, where you are simultaneously the observer and the observed. In peak experiences, you felt the boundaries of your individual self become porous, merging with something vast and ineffable. This is multi-reality awareness, the recognition that human consciousness can access multiple valid modes of experiencing existence, each with its own epistemological rules. Jung's concept of the collective unconscious implies exactly this. Beneath individual consciousness lies a shared psychological dimension where time, space, and causality operate differently than in waking reality. In this deeper layer, past and future exist simultaneously. Symbols carry more truth than facts, and the boundaries between self and other, inner and outer, become fluid. Those who see reality differently experience what might be called ontological flexibility. the ability to shift between different modes of reality without losing grounding entirely. You can engage fully in consensus reality, following its rules and achieving practical goals. But you also know there are other valid ways of knowing and being. In your dreams, you access the imaginal realm, where psychological truths express themselves through narrative. In synchronistic experiences, you glimpse an acausal reality, where meaning rather than mechanism connects events. In encounters with archetypes, you touch a transpersonal dimension that transcends your individual existence. The danger here is what Jung called loss of containment, becoming so enamored with alternative realities that you lose the ability to function in consensus reality. This is where psychosis begins, the failure to maintain the boundary between different orders of reality, allowing them to collapse into confusion. But the gift, when wielded consciously, is profound. You become a bridge between worlds, able to bring insights from the deeper layers of reality into practical expression. Jung himself embodied this capacity. He could descend into visions that others might experience as psychotic breaks, dialogue with autonomous entities, and navigate symbolic landscapes. Yet he always returned, bringing back maps of territories most people never consciously visit. His legacy, analytical psychology, the concepts of archetypes and the collective unconscious, the understanding of dreams and synchronicity, represents wisdom harvested from those other realities and translated into forms consensus reality could understand. How to work with this sign? Practice what we might call reality mode mapping. Identify the different states of consciousness you can access: waking consensus reality, dream states, creative flow states, meditative awareness, moments of synchronistic connection. For each mode, notice: what are the rules here? How does time work? What constitutes real in this state? How do I know things in this mode of awareness? By consciously mapping these different reality modes, you develop the capacity to navigate between them deliberately rather than being thrown between states unconsciously. This is the ultimate expression of psychological integration, not choosing one reality over others, but recognizing that human consciousness evolved to access multiple dimensions of existence, each offering unique forms of wisdom. Integration, becoming the bridge between worlds. If you recognized yourself in these 7 signs, you're facing a choice that will define the trajectory of your life. You can suppress these capacities, forcing yourself into a narrower band of perception to fit consensus reality. Many people do this, and they experience it as a slow death of their truest self. Or you can embrace your unique perception and commit to the demanding work of integration. Integration means learning to honor your direct experiences of reality while maintaining the grounding necessary to function effectively in the world. It means shadow work, recognizing and reclaiming the disowned parts of yourself until you become whole. It means developing fluency in symbolic language so you can read the messages your unconscious sends. It means cultivating synchronicity sensitivity as a navigation system, using meaningful coincidences to confirm you're aligned with your authentic path. It means practicing active imagination to establish conscious dialogue with the deeper layers of your psyche. The 30-day integration practice. Combine all 7 signs into a daily practice. Begin each day with 10 minutes of active imagination, allowing archetypal figures to emerge and engaging them in dialogue. Throughout your day, maintain what Jung called dual awareness, participating fully in consensus reality while remaining alert to symbolic meanings and synchronistic events. When strong emotional reactions arise, immediately ask, what shadow aspect is this revealing? Before sleep, review the day's synchronicities and archetypal themes, recording them in your journal. This practice builds what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to unite conscious and unconscious, transforming their conflict into creative synthesis. Ethical warnings. With increased perceptual capacity comes profound responsibility. Never use your insights to manipulate others or inflate your ego with spiritual superiority. Jung warned against archetypal inflation, identifying with archetypal forces and losing your human groundedness. Remember, you're not special for perceiving reality differently. You're simply wired to access certain layers of consciousness more easily, and this comes with both gifts and dangers. The measure of true integration isn't how many visions you have or how many synchronicities you experience. It's how much more whole, grounded, and effective you become in serving your unique purpose. The promise of this work is nothing less than wholeness. Jung called the process individuation, becoming who you truly are beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and social programming. Those who see reality differently are being called to this journey with particular urgency. Your unique perception isn't a disorder to be medicated away or a quirk to be ashamed of. It's the psyche's way of saying you're capable of accessing wisdom that most people never consciously encounter. Now do something meaningful with it. The closing, your invitation to the depths. In 1913, Carl Jung stood at the edge of an abyss. He could have retreated into the safety of conventional psychiatry, dismissing his visions as symptoms to be eliminated. Instead, he chose descent. What he found in those depths transformed not just his own life, but our entire understanding of human consciousness. You stand at a similar threshold. The 7 signs we've explored, archetypal resonance, shadow recognition, synchronicity sensitivity, reality threshold flexibility, active imagination capacity, symbolic perception mode, and multi-reality awareness are not separate phenomena. They're facets of a single underlying truth. You have access to layers of reality that consensus consciousness has forgotten. The question isn't whether you possess these capacities. If you've read this far with, you do. The question is, what will you do with them? Will you suppress your unique perception to fit into a world that demands conformity? Or will you undertake the hero's journey of integration, descending into your own depths and returning with wisdom that might illuminate the path for others? Jung believed that those who perceive reality differently are not broken outliers but evolutionary pioneers. You're sensing the next stage of human consciousness trying to emerge. The collective unconscious is making itself known through your unique nervous system, inviting humanity to remember capacities we never entirely lost, just buried beneath layers of rational materialism. This is your initiation. Welcome it, study it, integrate it. The world needs people who can navigate multiple realities, who can translate the symbolic language of the unconscious into forms consensus consciousness can metabolize. The world needs bridges between the seen and unseen, the rational and the archetypal, the individual and the collective. Jung made this journey and left us maps. Now it's your turn to explore territories only you can access. The collective unconscious is calling. Will you answer?